Hello, my friends. This is Kristina, co-founder of Mindvalley and the host of Mindvalley Book Club. And I have another very interesting book to discuss with you today and a really wonderful guest who is going to join us right now. My guest is Dr. Anne-Laure Le Cunff. Sorry, it's quite a mouthful, your name. Hi, Anne-Laure.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Kristina.
I promise I was rehearsing, but I believe your name has a French origin, right?
Yes, it's French, and even French people don't know how to pronounce it, so you're okay, don't worry.
Thank you so much. And I'll make an official introduction to Anne-Laure, but meanwhile, I want to encourage you to interact with us. If you're watching us on social media, you can leave comments under the video. Today, we have a very cool book to discuss. It's called Tiny Experiments. Here's the book. And I believe my guest might have the actual physical book by Anne-Laure Le Cunff. And before we go into the conversation, I have to make a brief introduction about my guest. So my guest is a former Google executive turned neuroscientist, and she got her PhD in King's College London, where she was researching the way we learn. Anne-Laure is also the founder and the host of NES Labs. This book is very heavily science-based. So a lot of the topics that Anne-Laure discusses in her book are actually based on neuroscience and the way your brain works, the way, how do we feel certain experiences, for example, whether it's procrastination or perfectionism. So the book talks about how to switch the linear goals or this goal obsessed society that we live in towards a little bit more viable model of being just curious, making tiny experiments. Of course, I'm giving a very shallow introduction to this book and we'll go deeper into it. But what I want to say is that it is a very practical book in addition to being science-based, of course, and in addition to being written in a very engaging way, it is also very practical. So you will get exercises which you can do as you read. In fact, in the very start of the book, at least, I had a feeling that it makes sense to take breaks after each chapter and do the exercises, do the homework, and then move on. So not read this book in one sitting, but actually read it as a learning experience. So this is my introduction, very shallow introduction about the content, but more about the format of the book. In fact, since that's the topic of the conversation, I know that your interest in this topic and in neuroscience particularly wasn't initial because you started your career in a very different field. In fact, you had this wonderful job that a lot of people love at Google. Can you walk us through what happened? And I know that your family actually was pretty freaked out when you decided to make a heel turn on your career.
Yes, freaked out is actually the correct term here. So, yeah, as you just mentioned, I started my career at Google, which was my dream job at the time. I had always been a little bit of a nerd. I loved technology. And at the time, working at Google really felt like I was joining kind of a place like where I could be on a mission to really bring the best of technology to the world. The people I was working with were super smart. The projects were super interesting. And yeah, I would wake up every morning and ask myself, how is it that I got this job? I'm so lucky. To the point where I was also, and that was the flip side of that seemingly positive experience, I was also constantly worried that someone would realize that I actually didn't belong there, that I wasn't smart enough to work at a company like Google with all of those very smart people. And because of that, and I didn't know the term at the time, but you probably know the term, we all know it now, imposter syndrome. That's what I was experiencing. I didn't know it was a thing, but I was saying yes to absolutely everything. I was the yes girl. You could come to me and say, hey, do you need help with this project? I would say, yes, absolutely. And I would end up working really, really long hours. I was canceling plans with friends just so I could finish a project. And basically, I became obsessed with being successful at work at the expense of everything else in my life. And I could have probably continued going like this and pushing myself for a very long time, but my body decided otherwise. And I had a wake up call at some point. I had a blood clot in my arm that was traveling to go to the lungs. And it's really in that moment that I had a realization that I had been really deprioritizing my health and thinking only about work. That's when I started wondering, is that really what I want to do right now? Is that what I want to do with my career? Do I want to do something else? And this was the first time I really started thinking about what are other ways that I can work that might be a little bit healthier and more generative.
Mhm. So you, since you mentioned the imposterism, and of course, maybe I just missed it. You do not really talk about imposterism actually in your book, at least not as a separate chapter, like for example when you talk about perfectionism. Uh, is there a reason?
I just feel like there's so much that has been written about it already that it did not feel new and interesting enough. I didn't feel like I could add anything fresh to this that would be useful to people. I
Mhm.
wrote this book for people who are highly ambitious, highly curious, and already highly self aware. The kind of people who read my book, Tiny Experiments, they've probably already done a lot of self work, a lot of self exploration. And I think writing an entire chapter about imposter syndrome would almost be a little bit insulting to the work they've already done. So, this is why I did not write an entire chapter about this. I try to really meet readers from a place of you've already tried a lot
So
of
you didn't write it not to insult your reader.
yes. I think my readers are very smart, and so I really try to meet there where they are. So that's why there's no chapter about imposter syndrome.
This book, the book that you wrote, it is for a more sophisticated reader, probably, at least in the points where it comes to self-awareness and awareness of one's thought processes. And also it actually kind of escalates in the sense that it starts quite light and easy about, linear goals, the topics that we will like to discuss in everyday life, but it doesn't stay on one topic. It actually goes on and on and on. So unlike so many books in personal growth, which revolve around one main idea, this book actually covers quite a lot of ground. So what I want to ask, what's the problem with the linear goals, the way we understand them right now? And why did you come up with the solution of tiny experiments instead?
So, linear goals are based on the outdated idea that in order to be successful, you need to have a very clear vision of where you're going, and then you just need to work really, really hard to get there. And this is what we're taught in school when, people tell us just, decide what you want to do and then do it. We all know anyone who has actually tried to do something a little bit ambitious knows that this is not how the world works. Everything keeps on changing all the time. You keep on changing all the time. And there is so much uncertainty that really having this kind of fixed, rigid, linear goal and saying, I'm just going to work hard and get there, is a little bit like having this illusion of certainty that is not aligned with how reality works. When we cling to linear goals, there are lots of negative consequences. So, one of them is that it creates fear in the sense that we have this very binary definition of success, and we feel like we really need to get to our destination. And we have this fear that we will fail, that we won't get there. It
Mhm.
also leads to what I call toxic productivity. Because again, if you think that you just need to have a vision and work really hard to get there, anytime something is not working, you blame yourself, feeling like, oh, it's probably because I'm not working hard enough. I just need to work harder and then it's going to work out. And so that's toxic productivity. And the last problem it creates is that it creates unhealthy social comparison, because when everybody has linear goals, then we have this kind of giant leaderboard where you keep on comparing yourself to others, and you wonder, why is it that this person I was in school with is already there and I'm still here? Am I being fast enough? Am I being productive enough? Am I being efficient enough? So there are so many problems with linear goals. And in the book, I encourage people to replace those linear goals with tiny experiments instead. And the reason why is because you can actually be successful without knowing where you're going. This is what scientists do all the time. They don't know where they're going. If they knew where they were going, if they knew the outcome, there would be no point in doing research. So instead of starting from a fixed outcome like you do in linear goals, they just start from a place of curiosity. They want to know what might happen if I try this approach. And if you keep on doing that over and over again, if you keep on trying a new approach, learning from whatever mistakes that you make, and then iterating, you are going to grow in a way that is not linear, that is not predictable, but you are still going to grow.
I really love the scientific approach that you bring into everything, including the exercises that you suggest to people. You actually have the courage uh, to contradict pretty much everything that our contemporary society believes in, because we have so many examples of how hard work and hustle has brought people to success. And in fact, that these are all the examples of success that we ever hear. And if we think about people who, well, apart from scientists, who have achieved great success without being single-mindedly obsessed about their goals, there are not a lot, at least not in popular culture. So where do you find this this courage to contradict what everybody believes in?
Oh, thank you. This is a great question. So what I find absolutely interesting is that narrative that all of these people have been successful because they had this single-mindedly obsession with whatever goal that they had is not true. What we do is that we become successful and then we retrospectively rewrite our own story to have a nice narrative that is easier to share with other people. And it doesn't even come from a place of malice or manipulation. It's just the way we're built as human beings. We are natural storytellers. And so when we look back on our own life and our success, there is a very natural temptation to look through that path and then retell it to others in a linear way. And so we say, yeah, of course, I started working on this project when I was 20, and then I that was the next evolution, and then it grew like this, and now, haha, look at me, I'm successful. The reality is, if we removed that bias for storytelling that we have as human beings, and you manage to really, really ask people, how did you end up being so successful? And they gave you an honest answer. They would tell you, oh man, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea. I didn't know where I was going. I tried so many different things, and 5 of them failed. One of them worked out. And I decided to double down on this until it stopped working. And I didn't know why. And so I tried something different. And then I met this person who said, hey, do you want to collaborate on this project? And I said, why not? And we did that. And then that gave rise to another opportunity. Very non-linear, very, very non-linear. And so the reason why I have, as you say, the courage to go against the grain and say that we should embrace the non-linear approach is because I know that actually success is non-linear, and that if we remove the layers of storytelling, this is how people become successful. Not by clinging to linear goals, but by embracing the fact that success is messy and a lot of it is unpredictable.
The book is not strictly speaking about success, although I would be very interested to read a book of yours about success specifically. What I want to ask is, I really like in one of the chapters, you're bringing up the concept of time, the way Greeks understood it, which was Kronos versus Kyros. Could you explain to the readers, oh, sorry, not to the readers, to our audience, what's the difference and why did Greeks see time in such different ways? It's like one phenomenon, but they have 2 different words for it.
I want to just first preface this by saying that the book is not explicitly about success, but actually success is an underlying concept and that I talk about a lot. It's weaved into the book because I think a lot of the toxic productivity, the pressure we put on ourselves, and a lot of the problems we have with burnout and overwhelm in today's society are actually because of this very rigid definition of success that we have. And so although this is not a book about being successful in the traditional sense of the term. This is a book about figuring out your own definition of success, which might look very different from what the traditional definition is. And that actually ties to your question about the two definitions of time that the ancient Greeks had. So the ancient Greeks had two words for time. The first one, Kronos, is actually very similar to our definition of time. This is where you get the word chronometer, for example, in English. And Kronos is a quantitative definition of time. It's the time of seconds and minutes and hours and weeks and months. It's the time that we use in our calendars where we have those little boxes and we need to fill all of these boxes with as much stuff as possible in order to feel like we're living a meaningful, successful, productive life. This is Kronos. And this is the kind of definition of time that gives us anxiety as to whether we are actually making the most of this limited quantity of time that we have. So that's the definition of time that we have in our modern society. But the ancient Greeks, they also had another word for time, which was Kyros. And Kyros is a qualitative definition of time. It's the idea that time is not a series of identical boxes. Time is elastic. It can stretch, it can go faster, it can have depth, it can have texture. And I know all of this sounds quite philosophical, so I'm just going to give you a very concrete example. Whenever you're having a conversation with a friend, maybe you're watching sunset with a friend and you're having a little tea together and you're talking about life. And at some point you look at your watch or your phone and you feel like, oh, where has the time gone? Has it been 5 minutes, 2 hours? I have no idea, right? You lose track of Chronos time because you're in a Kairos moment. And making space for Kairos in your life really means to reconnect with the qualitative aspect of time, knowing that in some moments, reading a bedtime story to your kid is actually more important than finishing a presentation. Knowing that in some moments, going for a walk is more important. In other moments, getting in hyper focus mode and finishing that project is the most important thing that you want to do. Other times, doing nothing is actually the most important thing that you can do for yourself. And that's Kairos. That's really connecting with the depth and the quality of each moment of our human experience instead of treating time as if we were in a factory and where we have to build as many widgets as possible.
I actually really loved that chapter, and not just this one. And I think even that chapter alone would have already changed quite a lot of people's lives. But what I want to ask, you do mention that Kairos feels a little bit like the flow, the way Mihai Csikszentmihalyi describes it. And I kind of feel somewhere inside that they're different concepts. But can you maybe explain the connection or the differences between the two concepts? Because Kairos approaches obviously from the point of view of time versus... Anyway, if you could elaborate on the connection or the distinction between the two.
Yeah, so being in the flow can actually be a Kairos experience, but it's just one of the Kairos experiences that you can have. Again, watching sunset and feeling quite emotional is also another type of Kairos experience. Listening to someone and completely losing track of time, or listening to music and losing yourself in the music in this way. And so flow is one of the very deep human experiences that you can have in a Kairos moment, but it's not the only one. There can be many others. There's an infinite number of Kairos experiences that you can have, and actually figuring out for yourself, what are my Kairos moments? What is really helping me reconnect again with that depth of the moment where I lose track of Kronos? And I am so present in this moment, so connected, so alive that I lose track of the seconds and the minutes and all of that. That's figuring out your own types of Kairos moments.
What I like about you bringing in this new concept is that flow is very often focused on productivity, which is exactly, you were mentioning toxic productivity, but it's also part of the same narrative, which is why I also said that your book is not strictly speaking about success, because as I was reading it, I know that success is the underlying story, but as I was reading it, I realized that this is more of a tutorial to life itself, because there are so many aspects covered, but like you cover so many aspects beyond just professional expression, which are important for life. I guess where I'm trying to take it next is, I got lost in my thought, honestly. I think it was one of those moments where I went with my thought and I didn't know where it was going. I was just exploring.
It happens to me all the time. But I can kind of just build on top of what you just mentioned. And yeah, with flow, I agree that I personally think it's unfortunate that it has been, and especially in the English speaking world, in the US and the UK, that flow has been limited in a lot of the writing and the literature and the applications to just being more productive. But when you read the original work, it's a lot more than that. Being in the flow is a lot more than that. And it's not necessarily about the kind of productive output that you have. It can be a lot about the creative experience that you have in the moment. And as a writer, for example, I can tell when I'm in this mode where I just forget about everything that's around me and I'm lost in the words, and things seem to connect together in a way that almost feels magical. It doesn't really matter in the end how many words I wrote, how productive I was. That flow state experience was still there. And so I really wish more people cultivated or try to cultivate and make space for that state of flow in their life, not just in order to be more productive.
So, talking about Kairos moments, I now finally, thankfully, remembered where I was going to. I know you give some suggestions uh, how to notice your Kairos moments and maybe cultivate them when you need them. And some of them were very simple. In fact, I was planning to experiment with the one of sitting against the wall or in the corner. But where I'm taking it is that you mentioned somewhere there, and it's not a quote, obviously, it's just from memory, that these tools are very simple, but they're powerful. And then you turn it around and you say that their power probably comes from their simplicity. Could you explain this concept a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was for me saying that so in this part of the book, I talk about what I call anchor rituals. And those are very small, very easy rituals that you can create for yourself to go back to this Kairos state. And so I give a few examples from people I have interviewed, and it can be something like making yourself a cup of tea very slowly, stretching, laying down, sitting sitting in the corner of a room. Some of them were really funny. And the reason why I'm saying they're powerful because they're simple, not in spite of being simple, is because I have seen a lot in the world of self improvement, in the world of productivity, in the world of personal growth, people constantly overcomplicating things and creating these very complex frameworks that are completely unsustainable. So the first time you create your framework, you're so excited about it. And maybe the first week you apply it and you have this new morning routine followed by this new productivity dashboard that you're going to use, followed by a self-reflection method that you're adding at the end of the afternoon, etc., etc. And obviously, after 2 or 3 days, this is completely unmanageable. You stop doing it. And quite often, what I see with people I work with, you don't blame the framework, you blame yourself.
Mm,
You feel like, oh, but I built this framework based on these different coaching methods or these different books that have been bought and read and celebrated by millions of people. So obviously, if this is not working for me, I'm the problem. And so this is why, so this phrase that you mentioned in my book is kind of a little nod, a little encouragement for people to figure out what is a simpler approach. Whatever you want to achieve, whatever you want to change in your life, what is
Mm-hmm.
a simpler, smaller, more sustainable, more manageable way to make those changes in your life that you're actually going to be able to do, and where you won't have to, blame yourself because you've tried to do something that was too big and too complicated?
So sometimes we're a little bit binary. So building up on that reply, what I want to ask is that one of the themes in the book is actually not to fight things, or not to maybe complicate things as in here. Yet in personal growth, there's another concept where we believe that you have to be outside your comfort zone, that you have to struggle, you have to fight, you have to overcome difficulties. Like in sports, they like to say no pain, no gain. So where's that balance? Because I know you do not promote no pain, absence of pain or easy life, but it does come across that if you're struggling, then maybe that's a message. How do you know where you are just banging your head against a brick wall and you need to change the course, versus that maybe this amount of challenge is good for you?
Yeah, it's really the difference between blind effort and what I call metacognition in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, blind effort is again aligned with the idea of those linear goals. You pick something, you say, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to work really hard. And very often, which we haven't talked about, but I talk about in the book, very often those goals are not even our own goals. We copy pasted them from other people based on whatever we think society is expecting from us, or based on whatever definition of success is the common definition of success in our environment, which is yet another problem. And then we blindly use our willpower and we push through and we try to get there. Versus effort, yes, absolutely. If there's something you're interested in, you want to explore, and usually, it does take a bit of work, that's completely fine. But add on top of that metacognition. Metacognition means thinking about thinking. It's the uniquely human ability to observe your own thoughts, your own emotions, your own behaviors. And so instead of being kind of like a robot on autopilot saying, I'm going to get there, I'm working really, really hard, it's making space for that self reflection where you observe what's working, what's not working, what's difficult, what's easy for you, what you might want to tweak. And so,
Mm-hmm.
in this way, again, like a scientist, instead of keeping on repeating the exact same thing over and over again and banging your head on the wall and then wondering why things are not working, you can iterate. You can say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is working, let's keep on doing this part. This is working, this is obviously not working, and I'm struggling with this. I'm not going to blame myself and say, oh, I'm lazy, I just need to work harder. No, I'm going to look at the signals and I'm going to unpack them and see what needs to change. And I might not be 100% sure about the solution, but I'm going to try something. I'm going to try a different approach.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to reflect again, practice metacognition again, and look at this change. Did it work? Did it not work? Did it get the result I expected or not? And this is how you keep on really iterating and creating what I call those growth loops, where every time you iterate, you're going to learn something new and you're going to grow.
Mm. So, guys, if you are interested in going into the topics deeper, then I do warmly recommend the book. Unfortunately, we are actually quite short on time, but I do have some more questions I want to ask. And also, the book, once again, The Book of the Week by Mindvalley. I mean, by Mindvalley Book Club, the book that we picked to be the book of the week. The book is actually by Anne-Laure Le Cunff. But what I wanted to say is that this book is actually going to turn a lot of things upside down for you. The way maybe you saw the things or believed about the things, or used to think about them, they will be turned upside down for you. And actually, as much as I'm tempted to go buy the book and ask the next question and the next question, about procrastination, about perfectionism, and so on, I actually, it wouldn't probably do it a lot of justice, because the book takes all those topics, dives deep, gives you exercises. So get yourself a book, read it. What I do want to ask before we will start wrapping up is that you, and I'm now asking Anne-Laure, you do often talk about things in a different way than the society understands. So, for example, one of the messages that also comes across quite a bit in the book, especially in the chapter about procrastination, is that you're not lazy. That very often the problem isn't the fact that you're not working hard enough, you're not lazy, and that's where the feeling of shame and guilt comes in. But actually, maybe the system is not working, or maybe you're not asking the right questions. So, in the book, you're talking about not fighting perfectionism, but procrastination, not fighting procrastination. I just had a Freudian slip about perfectionism. But what I wanted to ask you is, very often I hear people saying something along the lines that people are lazy. And I know you've worked with a lot of people, you interviewed a lot of people, you do study neuroscience. What does science say? Is that true? Are we really lazy? Or is it some bad talking that we are doing about ourselves?
Okay, there are two kinds of laziness that people are talking about. So, first, yes, human beings are lazy in general, and this is not a bad thing. This is how we invented the remote control. This is how we invented the escalator, elevators, the car. A lot of the most amazing technological advancements that we've had were because a human being somewhere felt like, I'm so tired of doing this thing. I need an easier way to do this. And so that's the combination of, that creates innovation really in lots of cases, is this mix of laziness and also ingenuity, where we decide to find a better solution. That kind of laziness absolutely exists and is part of human nature. There's another kind of laziness people talk about, when what you just mentioned, when we say people are just lazy, people are lazy, they're not working hard enough, they're not. And this is the one I want to question a little bit more, because in general, when people want to work on something and they're not doing it, there is an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. And especially if you're doing the kind of work that you actually want to do. So again, I'm not talking about someone who's stuck in a dead-end job with an awful manager. And every morning you wake up and you know you're going to be badly treated and you'll have to work on things that actually make no sense. Then yes, maybe you're feeling lazy, and maybe that makes sense. And who can blame you, really? Whereas a lot of people I work with, and this is where they struggle, they are either entrepreneurs or freelancers, or they're working on things that they actually enjoy, and they don't understand why some mornings they wake up and they don't feel like it. And again, they blame themselves because they say, I'm so lucky, I'm working on something I'm actually very curious about, I want to work on, and somehow I'm procrastinating. Why? And this is where it is a lot more useful to treat that procrastination as a signal from your brain that's trying to tell you, hey, something is not quite right here. And although it is not at a conscious level, your brain is trying to communicate to you that something is not quite right. And so instead of pushing through, if you listen to that signal, you work with that signal and you interpret it, you can actually find a way forward, and you can regain momentum when you do this without the suffering of self-blame and self-judgment that we normally have around procrastination.
Thank you for this answer. And by the way, there are a lot of really empowering messages in the book. Fortunately, we only got to cover about a quarter of the book. So it is, as I said, it dives deep into topics, into very important topics. One of my dear topics, which I didn't even touch upon, is obviously perfectionism, and gives you very practical steps, what you can do to start untangling the situation. And actually, what I liked about Anne-Laure's approach is that it's unlike what's common in personal growth industry, it's a little bit more scientific. So, for example, Anne-Laure has this amazing exercise field notes, and then she builds upon this exercise through the book. So check it out. It's really, really cool, really worth it. And before we go into closing and my final question, I want to ask Masha if there are any questions from our audience that you can bring up.
So, what is the best source to find tiny experiments to improve your life? So, if you're a scientist, and a really tiny experiments is about becoming the scientist of your own life, it always starts with observation. And I know you might be excited designing your first tiny experiment, but I highly encourage you to spend 24 hours observing your own life and pretend you know nothing about it. And ask yourself questions like, what gives me energy? What drains my energy? What am I curious about? What do I want more of and less of? And based on that, you can design your first tiny experiment. And that can be across any area of your life. That can be your health, your work, your relationships, anything where you feel like, things could be different. Is there something new I want to try? And I don't know if that's going to work. I'm just going to run a tiny experiment.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to ask my last traditional question in a moment, but first I want to do the traditional. If you're watching this video, please leave a heart for my guest in the comments or in the chat. Even if these comments are somewhere across the social platforms, they still matter because love transcends everything, distance and time. Now, the question to my guest, to Anne-Laure, is this: how would you like your book to change the world?
I would love for everybody to feel empowered to run their own tiny experiments. And I would love for everyone to walk around and ask each other, what kind of experiment are you running right now? And what did you learn? I think it would be a better world.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you're watching us on social media and you have no idea what's going on, then do sign up to Mindvalley Book Club. Every week we make reviews of the news books released the week before, and we pick 3 to 5 best books of the week, and then of those we pick one book to bring to you for an interview with the author. It's the book of the week. It is picked out of hundreds of books, so it's really a cool thing. And I have access to the world's best authors, even if sometimes they're not visible. But Anne-Laure, thank you so much for joining us. I cannot see you, but I can send you my love across the screen, and I hope your day goes well. And thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you so much. I just made a little heart for you, even if you didn't see it. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for the great questions. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, and bye-bye.